Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural online training sessions for the Saskatchewan Air Cadet League volunteers. The format for today will be that we'll have a full participation in everybody in the first session. Then we'll do a breakout sessions in the second period, and then a Q&A in the third session. There will be breaks between the first and the second and third sessions. So at that point, then you can get what you need. We do ask that everybody keep their mics muted during the presentation as we are recording this, and we'll move forward from here. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saskatchewan Air Cadet League volunteer training session. We are volunteers who are working with the cadet program, and today's session will include a session on overall volunteerism. The chairpersons will be the second session, as well as breakout sessions in the treasurer and the members and SSC chairs. And then the third session will be a question and answer session. We do ask that all participants keep muted during the actual presentation of the slideshows and save your questions till afterwards. Now we'll begin. So this is a training session for the Squadron Sponsoring Committees, or SSCs, and interested parties. Who are and what we all are about? We are youth who have an interest in aviation, leadership, and training. What is the motto of the Air Cadets? To learn, to serve, to advance. What are the aims of the Royal Canadian Air Cadets? To develop in youth the attributes of good citizenship and leadership, to promote physical fitness, and to stimulate an interest in the air activities of the Canadian Forces. Who are we? We're adults who work with youth between ages of 12 and 19 to develop leadership skills with a focus on aviation. What do? We do everything from survival exercises to outdoor training, to summer camps, to a biathlon and shooting program. We're doing citizenship trips and flights. We focus on the youth. And again, aviation is a huge part of what we do. Here we have a picture of a gliding scene and stuff. As you can see, that the cadets are very much impressed with it. Again, we have youth, so we have one of the big things we do is a lot of food. Little attempt at humor. You can see we have a gliding program. We have outdoor training programs, including exercises like mountain biking and so forth. But we are the adults in the program. We're the ones who are doing the leadership on the civilian side, as well as the officer side. And it all accumulates in an annual ceremony review, which is a showcase of what we can do, and the cadets are on display. This is what we're about. We talk about the Air Cadet program, and there's two distinct sides of the program. There's the Department of National Defense and the Air Cadet League of Canada. We're going to speak to the Air Cadet League of Canada volunteer side. And remember, at the end of the day, all the things we do for the cadets. So whenever you can ask yourself the question when you're making a decision, is this good for all cadets? It's generally the correct answer. We'll now move on to the main part of the presentation. The Air Cadet League of Canada was founded in 1941. It was developed civilian trained pilots for World War II. In 1946, we had refocused onto a youth leadership program with a focus on aviation for boys between ages of 13 and 19. In 1973, girls were fully integrated into the program. Currently, over 2,500 air cadets in 450 squadrons in all provinces and territories. Currently, we have 34 squadrons in Saskatchewan with approximately 1,100 cadets. Our operating body on the volunteer side is the Air Cadet League of Canada. They provide policy and direction for all Air Cadet squadrons in Canada. They provide insurance policies for all aspects of our program. They work closely with the Department of National Defence in Ottawa for program development. They provide achievement awards for both volunteers and squadrons. And I've included their web address at aircadetleague.com, and their toll-free number is 1-877-422-6359, which is I Can Fly. Provincially, we are the Saskatchewan Air Cadet League. We were established in 1950. We're made up of a volunteer board of interested civilians and volunteers. We are the civilian authority for the Air Cadet squadrons in the province. We promote the establishment of Air Cadet squadrons. We operate under the overall direction of the Air Cadet League Canada, but we operate as a separate legal entity. And with our Saskatchewan Air Cadet League, our main funding is SAS lotteries, and they are a huge part of what we can do, and we're lucky to have them. I've included our website at SKACL.ca, and we have 2 phone numbers. We have a toll-free number at 1-888-383-9285 or 780-9285 if you would like to try to get a hold of us. So what does the Air Cadet League provide? We provide SSC training. We provide training opportunities at Camp Saskatchewan, our aviation program, our curling program, effective speaking, our photo contest, our award and recognition program, and we provide area directors to assist in squadrons operations. Our area directors are your direct link between the SSCs and the Air Cadet League of Saskatchewan. Now we're talking today about what the Squadron Civilian Committees, or SSC, provide. So the squadron provide training support. That means parade facilities and training aids for the officers to allow the program to occur. You provide volunteer supports and officer assistance when requested and required. Parent volunteers to help to run the squadrons as required. A big part of your requirement is you provide financial support through fundraising. You promote the recruitment of officers and cadets. And again, once again, you operate as a separate legal entity for all other purposes. So who is the SSC responsible to? Well, you're responsible to the Air Cadets or the youth in our community. You're there to provide opportunities for youth between the age of 12 and 19 so that they have a program to learn leadership, discipline, and with a focus on aviation skills. You're responsible to the officers who require you for funding purposes and support purposes to allow the training to occur. And you're also responsible to the Air Cadet League of Saskatchewan, and we have certain requirements that we require on a yearly basis, and we'll be going through those requirements as we speak today. We're now going to move on to a little bit of what's happened in this last year and a half to 2 years. March 13th was an infamous day in 2020. That was the day that the Saskatchewan government and the government of Canada started locking down what we can do because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What that meant for the cadet program is when things reestablished, cadets moved on to online training. Volunteers no longer had access to cadets or parents, and the parents and cadets and guardians literally couldn't be in the same room. Meeting access has been restricted for the past 18 months, where normally you would have our volunteers meeting in a room and making plans and everything else. That's now gone to online, and so there has been some changes in how we can do things. Again, the SSCs have gone into a virtual mode instead of an in-person mode. And what we need to do right now is, as we're moving out of this, is to access our volunteers. We need to reestablish and re-engage our volunteers. So what is the new makeup of the SSC? For the past 2 years, there's generally been no face-to-face meetings. SSCs haven't had the opportunity to develop as they normally would. Zoom online meetings have become the way to operate. So although you might be contacting with them, it's still not the same as in person, but you are making it work. With online meetings, new parents have been harder to attract to the SSC. You don't have the one-on-one contact with them, and you can't bring them into the program as easy. Volunteer development has been much harder because, once again, you don't have that personal touch and you don't have the ability to mentor volunteers as much. And finding new SSC executive has been more difficult, as less personal contact with the volunteer. At our monthly SSC check-in meetings that we have, that's the biggest statement we're receiving from SSCs, is that it's just hard to bring the new volunteers in. So we need to find ways to do that. And this is one of the ways. How do we rebuild our volunteer base? Well, the biggest way is we have to educate our volunteers about what the Air Cadet program is about what the SSCs can do, and what they as volunteers can do. So we're helping to try to provide SSC online training with this video series, as well as SSC training. So we need to engage our volunteers. And engaging the volunteers is essentially letting them know what they can do and how they can help. We'll talk a little bit before we move too much further along about the League D&D partnership. The Department of National Events provides all training. They train the cadets as well as they train the CIC and CIC officers to run the training. The League, in essence, provides support. And when I speak with the League, I also mean the SSCs. The Leagues provide funding and volunteers as needed to operate the program. In a nutshell, that's the broad scope of what the two sides of the program do. And it's like, as any marriage of two different peoples, at times there's conflict and at times there's not as smooth of a working partnership as we need. But as any marriage, you work together to make it work. So the Squadron Civilian Committee provides training support. That means parade facilities. That can be everything from renting halls or finding training places in schools or in armories and so forth, as well as providing assistance in training aids. And that can be everything from computers to skis and rifles for the biathlon program. You also provide volunteer support for not only the fundraising part, but also for the officer assistance, as well as we provide volunteers to help run the squadron. Big part of what we do is we provide financial support to allow the cadet program to run. And we provide recruitment of officers and cadets. And again, we operate as a separate legal entity. And that's important to distinguish that. Again, we talk about the responsibilities and who are responsible to. I just wanted to reinforce that you're responsible to three different people. You're responsible to the Air Cadets, the youth of the communities, you're responsible to the officers, and you're also responsible to the Air Cadet League of Saskatchewan. So how do we communicate back and forth between our two partners? At the very top level or at the very bottom level, depending on how you look at it. But at the Air Cadet League Canada and the Department of National Defence through D-Cadets, those are the levels that they work together. The Air Cadet League of Saskatchewan and the Regional Cadet Support Unit Northwest in Winnipeg, that would be the next level. The area directors, or ZTOs, I do have a mistake there. I said ACOs. The ZTOs is Zone Training Officers. Those work in conjunction. And then at the SSC level, you have the squadron officers and the SSC working at that same level. And we're all there to work for the cadets. Without the cadets, we don't have a program. And that's so we always need to remember that. We're going to talk a little bit about what's required to make things happen. For training requirements, we need a parade location. We need office space for the officers, a parade square, classroom place, and washrooms. To make the training occur, you would ideally have a minimum of 4 officers: a commanding officer, a training officer, a supply officer, and a min officer. The commanding officer and training officer must be in uniform. Civilian instructors can take other positions, but a uniformed officer or a uniformed CIC officer take precedence over a CIC. So if you have new volunteers coming in who have CIC experience and training and stuff, if there is a CI, the CIC officer will usually supersede them and take over that position. Financial requirements for the SSC. You need to provide a yearly operating budget. We recommend that you have 2 years of operating funds to provide consistency over the years. You provide management of funds. You approve all expenditures, keep accurate records, report on a consistent basis, and provide a long-term action plan as well as a yearly short-term action plan. You're also responsible for recruiting. You're recruiting of squadron officers. And it's important to talk with the officers to know what their plans are and how they plan to move along in the system, so that you can actually plan your succession about who will be taking over and so forth. And you do work in conjunction with the Department of National Defense and ZTOs and so forth to make this happen. But the SSCs are responsible for beating the bushes and looking for volunteers who can become officers. You're also responsible for the cadet recruiting. And it doesn't just start at the beginning of the year, but that is the bulk of it will start in September or August, but it can start earlier on in the year and go year round. You're also responsible for volunteer recruitment. And that's where we need to re-engage our volunteers to how they can potentially help the Air Cadet program. We'll also provide optional training. And what is optional training? It's all non-mandatory training, which can include biathlon, bands, and so forth. And that does include all league-sponsored programs like trips to Camp Saskatchewan, photography program, curling, effective speaking, and so forth. Optional training is not gliding or survival exercises. Those are 2 programs that the Department of National Defense provides funding for to ensure that happens on a yearly basis. As the SSC, you manage. And what do you manage? The big thing is you manage resources, both human and financial. And it's important to remember that your human resource or your volunteers is equally or more important than your financial resources. All the money in the world isn't going to allow you to do what you need to do if you don't have the volunteers to make it happen. We're responsible for public relations. And it's important to remember that you have 3 different stories that when you're doing your public relations. The first story is to the Air Cadet. The second story is to the public. And the second story is to your financial supporters. So for example, if you have you're running a program such as effective speaking. So when you talk about your story to the cadets, you're going to talk about the value of the program, what it can do for them, and what they can get out of it. When you talk to the public, you're going to talk to about, look at what we can offer to you or your cadets or your potential cadets or your children or your youth of the province about, here's a program that teaches youth how to properly engage in public speaking. And when you talk to your financial supporters, you talk about with the financial support, you can provide this program to allow these youth to do what they can do. So it's one story, but you have 3 different sides to it. And it's important to remember that. You also make sure you have the squadron location, because that is an important place for the cadets parade. If you don't have the location and it gets moved, you're responsible for finding where it has to go. So those are the overall responsibilities of the SSC. We're now going to speak a little bit on planning. So what is planning? Planning is basically finding out who you're responsible, who and what and where and why. Who is responsible for the planning? Well, you as the volunteers, and you as the executive, and you as the SSC, and you as the officers. So essentially your entire adult volunteer base is responsible for putting in the plan what you want to do as the cadet program and the Air Cadet Squadron. The question is, when do you start this program? Do you start it in September? Do you start it in August? You start it as early as you can. And you look at implementing it in August and September. That's when the program will get running. So generally, you look at moving that back about 6 months, and you start setting up your plan for the upcoming year. So if you would start the planning process now, you'd be looking further on into the in the start of the 22 September year. So why do you plan? It's the old adage: if you jump in a car and you drive and you end up in Saskatchewan, and that's where you wanted to go, but you didn't know you wanted to go there, was that successful as a plan? Well, you can get there without planning, but planning gives you a path to where you want to go. And as I said, we work together in conjunction with the SSCs and the officers to help develop the plan, because the officers will provide what's required for training and what's required for the cadets, and the SSC can be realistic in what we can actually provide. So the planning cycle is you plan what you want to do, you implement what you want to do, you review it, and then you say, okay, what worked, what didn't, and then you build on the original plan and continue on. So it's that a simple cycle of planning, but it's important to do. So how do you get your framework for the planning? Well, essentially you need to look at your constitution. And a constitution really is why do we exist? What do we do? How do we do it? Where do we do it? Who can do it? And how are we organized? I know that's a very simplistic look at it, but your constitution essentially gives you the direction of the overall direction of where, how, and what you can do as an organization. We have sample constitutions which are available on our website and on our Zoom training, our Google training docs, which we'll allude to a little later on. But so when you're setting up your plan, look at your constitution and look what you can do. Example, here's our constitution. We are #1 SSC. We operate #1 Squadron. We provide support to #1 Squadron. Where do we operate? We operate in any town in Saskatchewan. Who are we made up? We're made up of parents and volunteers in the local area. And we're an incorporated entity that follows the bylaws and policies and procedures. That is just like a very basic example of what a constitution is and can do for you to allow your training and your planning to occur. So when you're doing your plan, it's important to set up a yearly calendar. So I've kind of gone through a quick year and in the life of an SSC. So as you can see, I start the year in May because that's when you actually can get everything set up for the upcoming year. So as you always see, you have your SSC online training meetings with the Saskatchewan Air Cadet League, the first Monday and Tuesday of the month. May is a great time to elect new officers because you're using the existing volunteers who are coming back, and they have an idea what the program is about. And you send your updated agreement to the Air Cadet League in May. In June, you have your meetings. We also nationally have our National Air Cadet League General Meeting and our annual golf tournament. And at the squadron level, that's also when you're winding down and having your year-end socials and so forth. July is rest. We move on to August and we have our meetings. This is when you as an SSC are setting up your recruiting and starting your program. And you're in this port, you're also preparing your year-end financial statements. In September, again, we have our meetings. You at the SSC level are having your open house. That's usually when the cadets start. You have your first SSC meeting, fall gliding starts, and the Saskatchewan Air Cadet League nominations are due in our office at September 30th. In October, again, you have your meetings. That's when the photo contest entries are due. We have our provincial AGM, and our ACC9 forms are due into provincial office. At the SSC, you'll have further. In November, again, we have our meetings. We have the Remembrance Day ceremonies, SSC meetings. This is when you as the squadrons can start bringing the information about the effective speaking information to cadets and the summer scholarship information to cadets. These include the 6-week courses and the shorter length courses that are occurring during the summer provided by the Department of National Defense. In December, you usually have a Christmas fundraiser. And at the squadron level, you can have a holiday season event. In January, we at the league have our area meetings. The summer scholarships are due, and you can actually start your curling practice. In February, again, you have the meetings. We have our zone curling competitions. We can look at having a fundraising event. We move on to March. You have your meetings, and then our national volunteer applications are due in the provincial office beginning of March. The Legion Medal applications are due in the provincial office in the middle of March. You have your week provincial curling competition and the zone effective speaking competitions. In April, you have your meetings. We have our provincial effective speaking, and then in May, it just all starts the whole process again. So you can see, as if you go through if you do your plan on a monthly basis, you actually set up yourself to succeed. I mean, you then take that plan and you move it back. You look at about a month in advance to ensure that you're providing also support to the programs as required. So as to the SSC, you're involved in the management, and you're going to look at who is your management team, and we consider that the executive committee. And what is the executive committee? You usually get that from your constitution, but your SSC is usually your chair, your vice chair, your secretary, and your treasurer. It could also include a past chair, an advisory role. But these are the key members of your SSC, just so that they're the leaders of the overall volunteers. Again, this is a recommended structure, but at the local level, at your squadron level, you'll need to make the decisions based on your best needs. And then from there, you will then have your SSC committees. And there can be varied and large, or as little as you need. But you usually have a communications committee, or your secretary, curling, effective speaking, your food, the fundraising, public relations, recruitment, transportation, volunteer screening, and others if needed. So you can have all these lists of committees that you need. And committees can be either one person, or they can be a group of persons or group of volunteers. And for example, your fundraising is going to be a lot more than one person, but your effective speaking can be just a one-person group to make it happen. So set the committee size as you need. That gets onto actually who does the work, which is the volunteers, who you are as one yourself. And how do you get the volunteers? Well, you need to make you have to give the volunteer the job that they feel they need and want. In order to get the volunteer to do the job, they actually have to know what the job is. They need a task description, and what the desired outcomes are. For example, if you want someone to run the effective speaking program, you're not going to micromanage it and say, here's every little thing you need to do. You basically say, well, we need to have a program. You need to educate the cadets what it's about. You need to have you have to have a squadron competition, and then from there we move them on to zone and potentially it's provincial competition. And you give them timelines to make it happen, and you give them about the approximate length of time that it'll take. Telling someone that, oh, I need you to do this job without any timeline commitments to it, they're going to be a little hesitant to do the job versus if you say, okay, I need you to do this job. It's going to take, here's how many hours. You're going to be working for approximately 6 weeks. the volunteer can say, "Oh, okay, I can do that." So it's important when you're giving the job, you give the job description, the desired outcome, and the approximate time that it is going to take. And also let the volunteer know who and where to come for assistance. They can't, if they start to feel overwhelmed with the job, they need to know who they can go for guidance. Now, the question we've had raised recently is, do all volunteers need to be screened? It's in the best interest of all volunteers need to be screened on the league side. This provides better financial support and liability support for the volunteer. So it also helps identify the volunteer more closely in your organization. So although it may seem that we shouldn't be volunteer screening, we still are, and we want all volunteers to be screened. The next part we'll talk about is on squadron fundraising. And squadron fundraising is one of the questions we always get is, well, how much should we fundraise, and how much and why, and so forth. And how do you determine how much to do? Well, first off, you need to look at your plan that you have set up and what you need to do, what your projected expenditures are, and how much you want to actually raise. When you're fundraising, you need to have a focus on what you need to do and how much you need to do it for. For example, saying that you want to raise $10,000 to your membership without giving them the why or how you're going to make it happen, it's pretty hard for volunteers to understand why we need to raise those funds. If they look at the bottom line of your financial statement and say, well, we already have this money. But if you explain to them, here's what we do, here's how much it costs us to run the squadron, here's what we're planning to spend the money on, and here's how we're going to do it, and this is why we're going to do it, volunteers can tie in better to what you can do and why you're going to do it. We also get asked questions about, do you run large scale fundraisers or small scale fundraisers? Again, and that's individual SSC choice. You can run as large as you want or as many small ones as you want, as long as you're meeting the needs of the squadron and you're reaching your fundraising goals. That's the important part. And you need to also look at the amount of time involved in running that fundraiser and how much money you're making. So for example, if you run a Christmas poinsettia raffle and it takes 5 volunteers, 10 hours to raise $1,500, that's a very good fundraiser. Now, in the same stream, if you had that same project, say it was peanut sales, and you had 10 people doing it, and you spent 100 hours, and they only raised $500, well, you may want to look at what's the more effective fundraising programs you can run and move forward with those. So who can fundraise right now? Currently, cadets are not allowed to fundraise, but all our volunteer parents are allowed. That doesn't mean you can't approach the parent of the cadet to fundraise. You can, and that's who you need to do. That's who you need to use for your fundraising programs. And again, it's an education process. You need to let them know why you're doing it, and you need to know the value of what they're going to provide to the program. The next question we get often asked is, can a parent donate money to the squadron and for tax receipts? Well, first off, with the new rules by the CRA, you will need to be a registered charitable organization in order to issue a tax receipt. The second part of that is that you can't have a direct benefit from that parent donating the money to the cadet. For example, if you would be running a trip, a spring trip to, say, Winnipeg to the Aviation Museum, and it was going to, the requirement for each cadet was going to be $200. You couldn't have a parent donate $200 and expect the tax receipt back. So that is the CRA rules, and I know when Brian speaks with the treasurers and in the treasurer's side, he'll talk about the value of becoming registered as a charitable nonprofit. The other question we get asked often is about squadron registration fees. Now, we're not going to say you can't do it, But there is cannot be a mandatory part of the program. You can have recommended if people want to donate, they say they can donate dollars versus their time. Well, it's still a donation, but yeah, there can't be a set amount at this point. We're also going to now talk about our Saskatchewan Air Cadet League fundraising that we do. All of the programs that we run have a percentage rebate back to the squadrons, and I'll talk to them as we go through them. Our first one that we do is our big one is which would be considered a large fundraising program, is our car cash draw. We ran it last year. We did some online sales. We're currently on hold until we have more direction on whether or not cadets will be able to sell tickets. We also are moving into running the draw now during the cadet year with a May, June type of a draw date. So more information on that. And we have a sliding scale of fundraising percentages back on this, which is, for the tickets are $5 each, or a book of 10 for 50. For the first book, on average, each cadet would get $15 back. If you sell 2 books on average per cadet, you get $25 back, and three and more, you get $40 back. So it can be a good lucrative fundraiser for the squadrons. The other programs we're running right now are the 50-50. We have an online 50-50. We're running at various times of the year. Currently, we have one that's scheduled to run till the 23rd of December, and we're over $5,000. But each squadron receives 25% of the ticket sales that are attributed to their sales online. We also have just implemented a new vintage aircraft flight weekend where we're selling 525 tickets at $25 each. And again, all of the squadron sales that are attributed to the squadrons will be receiving 25% of the ticket sales back to the squadron. The other area I want to talk was with the Saskatchewan lotteries. They have the community grant program where each squadron can go to their local recreation authority, whether it's a recreation board or the City of Regina Recreation Department, for example, or the Lanigan Rec Board, and you can apply on a yearly basis for a community grant. And these grants are provided. It's fairly simple. There's certain things you can't apply for, which are more legacy, like buildings and so forth. But for anything with programming based to it, which our program falls into, you basically provide the receipts, and the amount that you've been approved for, you will get a receipt. You will get your funding for. So as you can see, fundraising is a very important part of what you as the SSC do. Sorry, just before we move on, I do want to talk a little bit about when you're budgeting and so forth. When you're budgeting, you set your budget for the yearly basis, but you should also set overall goals and stuff for long-term budgets and short-term budgets with the fundraising stuff. So if your overall goal for fundraising for projects and so forth is $50,000 over 5 years, you can break that up into 10 years. So you set long-term goals and you set short-term goals. I know Brian's going to speak to more of the requirements on with the sorry, I just lost my place here. With the requirements for reports on the financial side of it. We're going to move on to volunteer recruitment. Who can be a volunteer? So basically, anybody who is a Canadian citizen or a landed immigrant can be a volunteer with the Air Cadet program. As long as you're 18 years of age, you can be a volunteer. Where do you find them? You're usually finding them as parents, but also with the extended families. So we look at the extended family being, it could be a blended family, it can be grandparents, it can be siblings, but don't limit it just to the direct parentage you think about. And how do you find them? And once you find them, what do you need to do? Well, first thing you need to welcome them in. It's important that when the volunteer first is identified and you're bringing them in, you need to talk with them, whether it's online or in person, and find out what they're about, find out why they're there. It's usually because of a cadet, but you find out why they're there and what do they want to get out of the experience. You then find out the jobs that they'd like to do, and you try to give them the jobs that are best suited for them. And you assist them or mentor them, but don't micromanage them. So if you do give them a job, the question shouldn't be, here's exactly how you do it. It's just give them, here's what needs to be done. What can we do to help you make it happen? And then you need to recognize recognize them at appropriate time. So for example, once the job's done, a little pat on the back or a thank you and stuff goes a long way. We're now going to move on to volunteer screening. We have a national program with the Air Cadet League Canada with Air Cadet League volunteer screening. All volunteers are recommended to be screened, especially the executive. All of the members of the executive need to be screened. And we recommend that all volunteers do get screened because it does give them better liability coverage. We do have new forms, and they are in the, you can always get them at the Air Cadet League Canada. I've left the website there, and they're always updating the forms. I do want to talk more about how we do it in Saskatchewan with our SUMAC database, which is our volunteer screening database that we have for Saskatchewan. So again, it's part of the national program. There are changes coming in 2022 where you at the squadron level will be able to actually input the data. Currently, we input all the data at the office, and until we actually get the training done, which will be occurring in probably February, March timeframe, we'll still do that. But right now, you get the forms completed, you do the interviews, you get the CPICs done, you check their references, and then you send the forms into us. We input it into the database, we do our oversight on it, and then we send back the listing and the training, the listing and the volunteer screening card. That's not going to change. There's been a lot of talk about the changes that are occurring with the Department of National Defense side about the screening that's going to be required for anybody working with the cadets on the volunteers as a volunteer member with the officers. That our side isn't going to change. That side's going to be as an addition to what already gets done. Again, we will be doing some training seminars in February. We'll be notifying everybody in January. They will be videoed and they will be available online. So once you've gone through everything, and you've gone through your cadet year, you've done your training for the year, you ran your plan for the year, and it's important to look back at what you did do and to celebrate your successes, and learn where you need to make changes. It's very, very important to review how the program went. Got to remember that not all things may have run perfectly. Take the lessons learned onto next year's plan. Don't be afraid to celebrate the success. And it can be something as simple as having a year-end party or just having some silly fun awards. Those are the things that the volunteers remember, and it creates a culture of positivity and productivity. So look at what you did and find out the things that worked well, and find out the things that didn't work so well, and the things that didn't work so well, if you want to still do it, find ways to change it to make it work, or take what did work well and expand on it. So evaluation is the last part of what you do with your whole on the yearly basis. So again, now how do we do all these things to make the SSC run properly? Well, it comes down to communication, leadership, delegation, and you build this culture of trust and teamwork. So basically, once you have your plan, you set your plan up, provide who needs to do what, you go through it. As the executive, you're there to help move it along, to monitor it, and by delegating it to the volunteers that need to make it happen. And you're providing the support when needed. And if volunteers feel that there is a culture of productivity and they can trust what's getting done, it motivates them to get the job done. Well, one of the key things is don't be afraid to have fun while you're doing it. Most people volunteer to get into a new group of people and to make that to make somebody else's lives a little bit better. So when you're doing these things, always find ways to have fun, because we have a job to do, but if you can do it in a fun atmosphere, it makes it much more easier to get done. And remember that Rome wasn't built in a day. This isn't gonna, when you take on this job as a committee chair or as the SSC committee, you might have all these grand plans and stuff, but remember that you got to do it one step at a time. You build your plan to be realistic, and you allow changes to occur to make it happen. So don't have a plan that's so rigid that you can't get it done, or you can't make changes to it. Make sure that you have built in the option to do these things. So essentially, you work together as a team on a plan that you put together. And once you get it, you go through the whole year, you look back at it and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, celebrate your successes, and you move forward. I'm now just putting up a resource page about our office phone numbers. We have both the office direct line or 1888 number. We have two different emails, either our info@skacl.ca or richardp.skacl.ca. The area directors, each squadron will have an area director. We'll be sending out a new listing in January here. But those are our direct link between the squadron and the SSC and us. And they're a valuable resource. Use them as you need. We'll be having our resources posted in two places for these training sessions on our Saskatchewan Air Cadet League website. So there's our website there. We'll also have it on the YouTube channel. I've also provided where the training documents will be on our Google Drive. And I've also, we'll talk further in the other sessions about our actual Google Drives for communication and how do you get to them if you haven't seen them. And I've also just thrown up our online 50/50 sales line. So there's just some resource lines on that. So essentially, thank you for attending our first online. At the end of this Q&A session, there will be an opportunity for you to do an online assessment of us and what we can do to improve. This is our first time doing it. So you can email it us at info@skacl.ca, and hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations. We'll now be taking a 10-minute break.